Welcome back. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because one of my favorite topics is behavior change and mindset. And I have Ted Huang on the podcast with me today, who I met during a cycling trip in Italy over the last couple of weeks. He is a 2 times Olympic windsurfer who took up road cycling because riding bicycles can't be that hard, right? And after racing cycling for a number of years, he's also got a degree in sports psychology, and we had a lot of topics that we were discussing in common that I'm really keen to explore and share further on today's episode. So welcome today, Ted.
Thanks so much for having me. I really looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, me too, so do you want to give us a bit of a brief background as to who you are, where you are, and how we met, I suppose?
Yeah. So, very briefly, early in life, I was not at all an athlete. None of my family members did sports, except I didn't really take to like team sports so much when I was little. And I eventually, when I was like 12 or 13, got into the sport of windsurfing. Long story short, my dad learned it and then I wanted to learn it and was hanging onto his ankles. So he like built the smaller rig for me and I went to the races, so to speak, and gathered momentum and, became a competitive windsurfer and went through that whole cycle of getting noticed by a national team, blah, 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 and just started racing competitively and really just applied myself to it. While at the same time, I was able to actually maintain my musical background a bit, doing like piano, violin. That I don't want to see the typical stereotypical Asian thing, but I that too, and was able to do both. And then eventually recognized as I started cycling as a form of cross training, really like the team aspect of cycling. And along the way, of fueling or helping, I guess, accomplish my cycling goals of becoming like a top level domestic rider, I learned about just running a team. So I ran 2 professional cycling teams in my day, as well as competing on them. And I really recognized everything that I knew with respect to mental performance applied to cycling, where you could literally tangibly see people with high VO2 maxes and, test off the charts in the lab, couldn't put it together on race day. So I was like, well, I really want to learn why that's the case, and also apply it to myself, of course. And it was really interesting to see how this dynamic played out over and over again, and not necessarily the strongest rider would win because it had to do with their headspace at the time and, how reliably they could have their own coping mechanisms to get through the different stressors that were thrown at them. Some of them could be nutritional. Some of them can be just feeling not confident in their strength that day. So many variables, not getting a good night's sleep. Did that mentally affect them more than physically? Who knows? There's all these little things that, or stress. We talked briefly prior about stress from a previous day, or in our case with working with athletes who don't ride full time or train full time, and race full time. They have family stressors, all sorts of stuff that really have an impact on maybe how they digest versus how they perform, all sorts of things. So anyways, long story short, I really settled on cycling. A lot easy to step out the door and got addicted to the aerobic workout. And as you can tell, my passion for behavior change stemmed both from my degree in college, which I don't know if I mentioned was the organizational behavior, plus just my wanting to further explore how we can be our best versions of ourselves. And my main drive is to help people be, I call it, more comfortable in their own skins so they can be their best versions, live their best versions of themselves. I'm not going to say it's always easy. It's a process. So you just have to learn to take the bad with the good and just learn to roll with the punches, so to speak.
No, absolutely. And I think this topic of behavior change and mindset is something that I'm really passionate about because throughout my career, especially in sports nutrition, but yeah, from the dietitian sort of background, when I started doing my master's in sports nutrition, I was working in boxing at the time. And I was with this really, really rough boxing gym in Liverpool in the UK. And I'd be giving these nutrition tips and advice to these young guys, and weeks and weeks and weeks go by, they would never do anything. And my journey towards my doctorate was because I was like, how do I get this behavior change to happen faster so that I'm not just telling them to do it, but they want to do it because eventually after so many weeks of telling them, they're like, oh yeah, I tried that and it worked. I'm like, yes, finally. But I'm like, how do we speed this process up and get them to want to do it themselves versus just being told what to do it? And that kind of led me to speak with, we had a sports psychologist who came and did, I think, a series, 2 lectures for us when we were doing our masters.
Uh-huh.
And afterwards, I was like, oh, I want to learn more. And so I arranged a meeting with him. And he's like, you're the first person in this course over so many years that has ever asked to have a meeting and wanted to learn more. I'm like, well, of course, because I want to be effective in what I do and I want to
Exactly.
have like really broad reaching change. And I've seen that you support the change in one person and that has that ripple effect of all the people around them in various different ways.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, what you've said added to my kind of understanding of behavior change is that ripple effect. Cause I was like, I want to make impact on a bigger level. Then you always realize that you have to just do it one step at a time, one person at a time. And then that
Mm.
helps inspire, I guess, what I would call
Yeah.
a change.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
absolutely.
what
And
works.
it's not always even just about performance as well, because like the number of, because I've worked with professional athlete and amateur everyday people who've got full-time jobs that want to do a triathlon or an Ironman or cycling or a swimming event or whatever. And so many times like they're like, there's been a dad I've worked with and he started eating vegetables, for example. And then all of a sudden his kids start eating vegetables because they see dad eating vegetables and that then influences positively a new generation. And they may not be involved in sport at this time in their life, but it's helping their health, which then impacts their mental health and their life and their quality of life and all these other things.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what part of what you're doing also is similar to me in terms of that you were developing higher self awareness in
Mm,
individuals because as they become more self aware, they recognize what they're doing, they can reflect better, and then that helps add with the behavioral component, change component.
absolutely. And that I think that teams in quite nicely with where this discussion started with us on this cycling trip that you were just on, because I'll often find that I'll tell someone like you need to eat more, I want you to eat more, but ultimately I want them to feel the difference and then they see the difference. And that is what I guess inspires them to keep doing it and keep trying it. And one of the, so for those listening on the trip that we were on, I was feeding everybody, keeping sure they were well fed and fueled during these rides, which
Yeah.
had, well, I think in kilometers, like 80 to 100 and something kilometers, 2,500 to 3,500, 4,000 meters of climbing day after day after day after day after day. These big mountain stages days, which it's not your everyday bike ride. And so to be able to back it up, you might be able to do one day in isolation, but to do two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, if you don't full well before, during, and after, it really has a big impact on your experience and your holiday and your trip. And so I'm always trying to encourage people like eat more, eat more. They're like, no, I don't need it. I'm like, is that true? But like, trust me, like give it a go. You'll feel so much better.
Yeah. So before we go further, I have two things I want to make sure I cover, which was addressing the question when people say, well, I'm not hungry. So I
Mm,
don't feel like eating. How do you
yeah.
address that? And then B, the whole mindset of like what trigger will pull people in to do the right thing? Because sometimes
Mm,
we had a discussion with two of my friends who were on the trip who you really impacted them where they're like, oh, it's not just what I eat, it's the timing of what I eat, or versus like
yeah.
what would be the trigger to a whole bunch of other things. It's like the cascade effect versus how do you, that's a really interesting thing of that there's always a behavioral trigger that will cause
Mm.
something to resonate. So like you talked about feel, like, or if they can feel it, that's a big trigger. Then they can actually be motivated to try something different if it's something they can tangibly feel. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're good questions because I think, and it's even, I think I remember a comment like early on during one of the first days or so where I was saying like, I would be recommending bare minimum sort of like surviving this. And like, probably don't want to be just surviving. I'd be looking for at least 60 grams of carbs per hour for this sort of trip. And you're like, oh, that's probably more than I ate when I was racing. And, and the conversations that sort of stemmed from that. And I think as to the hunger cue or like the convincing people, it is different for each person because I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of people that have been listening to this who have heard me say eat more hundreds and hundreds of times and be like, nah, it's fine, I'm getting away with it, I don't need to, I don't need to. And
yeah,
it's only when they actually do it and try it and they feel better, they're like, oh, maybe she's onto something. And that is what leads to the sort of change. I find often for a lot of people they hit, it's almost like you've got to hit rock bottom and something goes horrifically wrong sometimes to hit that pain point to want to change. But ultimately, I want to avoid people doing that on a Grand Fonder or an event. It might be that you bonk, you run out of fuel, like you need to get in the van, or you don't reach you don't reach the cutoff time point for a race or something, and that pain and like frustration and missing out is what the driver for some people. And other times it could be just curiosity, or it could be like, oh, I'm seeing someone else getting better and them improving. Like there's so many different behavior change techniques and drivers. Like
Yeah.
with my research, I was using the combi model in terms of mental blank now as to what are the I have to just
That's
add a
okay.
mental blank as to what it sort of stands for. But like there's a whole bunch of different things that are influencing our behavior, whether it's our knowledge, our environment, our motivators, and all these things that individually are going to drive us or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a big proponent of exploring individuals' personal values, which is kind of their framework, how they
Mm,
make decisions, as well as motivation, right? Because obviously you have to be pretty motivated to make a significant behavioral change. And so
yeah.
what motivates them? It could be fear of failure, which isn't
Hmm.
necessarily the most healthy way, or like you said, fear of having another catastrophic implosion, which
Hmm.
might have caused them to go, oh, wake up and I got to try something different,
Mm,
as well as curiosity. And it might be a combination of all three. Um,
yeah.
so the question becomes like, is that good for them to explore? Like what, or whatever works, just do it. I think it doesn't really matter. It's like whatever works for them, try it. At
Yeah.
the same time, it's funny. Like I'm going back to that conversation with the two friends that you met with and for a gelato.
Yeah.
And it was funny with just what resonated with them after I've been drilling into their heads. You need to eat better, fuel better. And it just seemed to, they understood, they nodded, they got it, except didn't lead to action.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really fascinating. Like if it comes from a maybe a more qualified source, that might be helpful. Or
Mm,
like you said, trying, seeing, tasting, it's working. Now we believe in it type of thing.
mhm.
I wanted to very anecdotally tell you that when I fueled much better on this trip than I usually do when I ride, 'cause I know I'm just like horribly underfueled. My wife, also a two-time Olympian, would attest that she's like, I'm terrible because I always just come to the door at the end of a ride.
Ravenous.
Yeah, just basically, I want to eat a real meal. And that's
Yeah.
probably not the healthiest way to approach even a lower intensity ride. But it's like, I want to
Mm,
eat real food, not just have processed bar foods or even homemade, energy food. So,
yeah.
actually, one question I would like to ask you is how bad is that to, end the ride basically almost bonking? Because I've done some training where I've
Yeah.
had really good results a week later where you do a depletion ride and you just come back exactly a week before you're cracked. You do like a 5 hour, depending on the length of the event, cracked, empty, refuel, and then you supposedly your body super compensates.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to think about that.
I think, and it's the most annoying answer for everything is like, it depends
Yeah.
because it really does depend on like, what's the purpose of the training? What's the purpose of the ride, the event? Because is
Yeah.
it pure performance or is it
Mhm.
like leisure? Is it enjoyment? And is it in terms of, is it a one off or is it like this multiple event thing? And I see like one of the mindsets that I'm always challenging people is like, oh, I'm getting away with it. I don't need it. And I always come back to, well, is that true? And is it helping or is it hindering you? And so, for example, like the coming back from the end of a ride, broken, like empty, like ravenous, wanting to eat everything in sight. There is a little bit of a limit as to how much we can eat. And if you're going on it's like some of the rides with the groups where I've been working with, they might be doing 10 hours on the bike nonstop at a moderate sort of intensity. But at that intensity, you're still burning generally 500, like the sort of your all day, everyday pace. Most people are burning about 500 calories per hour. It's very difficult to eat 500 calories worth of food per hour while you're exercising. You've got to eat significantly more than 150 grams of carbs per hour. So most people, it's just not possible. In order to, so you don't, yeah, to get I mean, so 1 gram of carbs has got 1 gram of carbs has got 4 calories in it. So like 100 grams
Right.
of carbs is 400 calories. So you're having to eat these huge quantities per hour, which some people can do it, some people can't. And as the intensity goes up, you're burning more calories. So if you're riding your sort of FDP pace that you can do it for about an hour and then you start fading, that's
Hmm.
around 900 to 1,000 calories per hour. And
Yeah.
then, but you run out of fuel because you can't match the expenditure. And so if you're doing these 5, 6, 7, 8 hour at 9 hour rides, you might be burning anywhere from 5,000 calories just during the ride, on top of your daily energy needs to just
Yeah.
stay alive and healthy and functioning. And so you might need to eat anywhere from 5 to 7, 8,000 calories per day to kind of match where we're expending. But the problem is if you finish your ride at say 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, then it's like dinner a couple hours later, and then you're starting 8 o'clock the next day. You've got these really minimal times to recover. And even though you might in theory get the numbers in, it's not had adequate time or timing or time to fully recover and refuel and repair any damage to your muscles. And so what I find is that with these sort of trips where it's like multiple days in a row, if people aren't fueling very well from day one, day two, by the time they get to day 3 or 4, everything starts unraveling. So maybe you get away with the first 2 days,
Yeah.
but by the latter end of the week, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make this. Like, oh, I might have to stop. Like, and then that creates the stress and the anxiety, or the beating yourself up, like, oh, I'm not fit enough. Like something's wrong with me. When it's like, no, you're just trying to like go without fuel. Like it's like expecting a car to go with an empty sort of fuel tank.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things going on there as to why and when. But for most people, that's kind of where I would expect a 50, 60 grams, kind of like the bare minimum for
Right.
enjoyment, but also for how the rest of the day carries on afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful because I would like layer in the mental side is that what's helpful is also that what you're doing with just the no brainer fuel or perhaps even quote unquote over fuel, which it doesn't sound like you can do on some of these trips early on is just, I call it the KISS principle, keep it stupid simple or keep it simple stupid because you're just
Yeah.
don't think, just do
Yeah.
it instead of letting yourself overthink. And that's one of the keys to we call choking effect is when you overthink because you start second guessing and overthinking basically. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
like that's another two-pronged approach of just fueling correctly leads to less overthinking. It's just like
Yeah.
everything's connected.
But also I find it for like in terms of long term and like the appetite and the hunger cue is an interesting one because I think a lot of times when people aren't feeling well is they get back from a ride and it's kind of like been normalized to binge eat after, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's just part and parcel of cycling, that you get in the door, you can get away with it, you can eat whatever you want. And typically in those scenarios, then it tends to be more like the sugar or the higher fatty or like more less nutrient dense, higher energy sort of food. And yeah, you might get away with it from a numbers perspective while you keep exercising. But it also, I find, tends to force people to remain in that I can't stop exercising, because if they stop exercising, their appetite is still ravenous all the time. Whereas when you flip the switch and you start feeling better around the training, then like one of the athletes I was talking to today, like when he's not training, his training days are like less than 2,000 calories, but then he also will eat 8,000 calories the next day. And each day, all that, like the 3, 4, 5,000 calories extra that's happening is all specifically before, during, and after training. And so while a normal breakfast might be 600 calories for him, a pre-training ride for a 6-hour ride, it might be more like 800, 900, even 1,200 calories because he's getting more before so that he gets better quality training, recover,
Yeah.
and performance.
Yeah. So this leads to a couple questions I might have. I don't know if viewers or listeners might have the same questions of how much does that higher bumped up metabolism, what did you say, last? If
Mm,
because I know a common observation I have with elite athletes is or even not even elite athletes, just people who like to do exercise, is they
mm,
exercise to eat
yeah.
in order to eat. And then it's this vicious cycle where, and I fall into this too, where like, oh, I need to
Yeah.
exercise so I can eat what I want or I can have dessert.
Yeah.
I always joke that I only started biking so I could, eat baked goods, more baked goods, and probably not
Yeah.
healthy.
Absolutely. And I think it's an interesting point because I think so many people there's all these foods that are on the naughty list that are like, oh, that's good, that's bad. And I think, and there's so many labels about like naughty and being good. And I always try to encourage people to, one of the things I do with when I'm working with people is actually help them uncover all this food noise and beliefs that are happening, because it's creating this, yeah, space. It's using up all this mental space of like, oh, that's too much, that's too little, oh, I shouldn't do this, and fear around food or avoidance, or even like this conversation I had this morning with my athlete. He was saying how he's noticed when he he's more restrictive or certain foods are not available for whatever reason, he starts craving them more. And I see that universally. I see that with a lot of
Mhm.
people. Like if it's the whole don't push the red button, and you're like, oh, now I want to push it,
Yeah.
and now I want to touch it. And I've seen that in cycling. I've seen that in a lot of other sports. We see it in like bodybuilding or those really extreme weight loss performance aesthetic sports where they typically, and boxing, jiu-jitsu, any sort of taekwondo, weight making sort of sport, they typically balloon and blow out within a week or so of finishing a cut or because they've been so super restrictive that they rebound in the opposite direction. And what
Mhm.
I've seen, both men and women, amateur, professional, elite, Olympic, is that when we get less restrictive and we start inserting some of those like extra foods, like the baked goods, like the pizza, like the gelato, and rather than putting them on the like, I can never eat this, which creates the desire and the craving, it's like, okay, let's look at how and when and where we can incorporate it. And so like the baked goods, like, okay, yeah, well, we're going on this 4 hour ride. What would you rather? This, I don't know, Cliff Bar, or would you like rather this croissant? I'm like, let's go. We're in Italy. Like, eat the croissant, of course. Like, and you'll enjoy it, and it gives you pleasure, because food is more than just numbers. It's the nutrients. It's pleasure and it's social. And so, same thing goes for eating out or eating with other people. It's neither a case of never eat out or only eat out. It's like, okay, well, if over the course of your week, then you're doing most of your big training rides of the weekend because you work full time. Like, okay, well, we know that you need more food before, during, after those training sessions. So
Yeah.
like, okay, well, the night before, that meal before the night before, like perhaps we want more carbohydrate in there. So we can intentionally decide, all right, like, I'm going to go out for that curry or that Thai food and have, yes, I might have more than I need, but that extra there is going to support the riding that I do tomorrow, or it's going to help with my recovery of what I've already done. And it's learning these, I guess, manipulation techniques of how to incorporate vegetables. So rather than like with pizza, having
Yeah.
to eat the whole pizza to feel full. It's like, all right, well, if we have a whole plate of vegetables and salad first, that kind of helps fills us up so that we
Yeah.
don't need to eat that extra 500 calories worth of pizza to feel satisfied. And we still get to enjoy the pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I noticed about when we talked on our trip about your approach is more of like an integrative approach of moderation. You don't necessarily have to go, like you said, drastic measures tend to call for drastic behaviors. And if you're able to tweak it so it's manageable, then it's more going to be more sustainable. And that's obviously a
Mm,
behavioral change plus is
yeah.
that you're going to be able to feel like this is a lifestyle that you can
Yeah.
sustain.
Yeah, and I think what I find really then satisfying is that, like, I hear from clients and athletes that I've worked from like years ago, and they've maintained the same weight, or maybe they've stopped cycling or stopped doing sport for whatever reason, and they've stayed stable with their
Yes.
weight, or nothing, it hasn't ballooned. Because I find that there's a lot of this fear of like people using exercise as punishment or using it as their only weight loss strategy. I'm like, well, if you intentionally adding that extra food that you need on a daily basis around the training, your food
Yeah.
intake changes. And if you don't train, so like this last month, you witnessed, like, I generally had no time to exercise pretty much at all for a month, and my weight, like, I stepped on the scales for the first time yesterday. I'm like, I'm the exact same weight and body composition as I was a month ago, and I had gelato 3 times when I was there, and I ate dessert probably at least a couple of times a week, and I had pasta pretty much every time. But I was also intentionally using these strategies myself with lots of vegetables. And I would be giving you guys like 2 or 3 sandwiches and wraps up, I'd have one wrap, because I'm like, well, I'm not burning as much energy as you guys. And so it's a strategy that becomes sustainable, and you don't have to then fear a gap in exercise, and or fear like, oh, I'm going to be so much further behind because I'm missing out for whatever reason.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think what's interesting to me is I think people might remark upon is your self control. Because when you've done a big ride the day before or burn a lot of calories a day before, the next day you might still be ravenous. So
Mm,
continuing that hunger urge is challenging, especially it is for me too. So it's like the day after our trip, after doing like 6 days with a lot of calorie burning,
yeah.
it's easy to be really hungry, beyond slowing down your eating and adding some fiber, maybe in advance to fill your stomach up and stuff. But how else are you controlling that craving? Because that's where you get people getting that vicious cycle, beating themselves up because they go, I ate too much. I need to do more exercise. So I'm not getting, I don't do a full recovery day because I'm actually want to burn some calories. And that's actually very, very thoughts on that. Because before you do that, I was going to say one of the techniques that is pretty common in sports psychology world is called mindful acceptance commitment therapy. So
Okay. Yeah.
that's using mindfulness or kind of what we call is being self-aware and reflective to be able to just kind of observe your thoughts. That helps you get through the emotional component of, my God,
Mm,
I'm so pissed off. I just, ate too much, to get past that angry emotion by doing
mm,
some breath work, which you're probably familiar with. And then
yeah.
once you're past the emotion, you kind of make a choice of like, oh, I can make a more informed decision on how I want to behave. And so that's
Yeah.
your acceptance of, okay, I'm not resigned to that this is going to be me. I can now make a choice and make a better
Yeah.
decision. And so then you commit to a new course of action, which is a commitment part of mindful acceptance commitment. And then you just carry on. And so that's
Yeah.
something you could do with nutrition, clients, is because they have to accept the situation, or that's what it is. Yes, I crave ice cream a lot.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be this horrible thing, right? Because
yeah.
the more you try the avoidance thing doesn't usually work with people. Or maybe it works for a little bit, but there's something called exposure therapy. There's some
Mm.
happen in between. So, anyways, I thought that's something that might be kind of an interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different like psychological mindset behavior change tools that are useful, and I think it always comes down to each individual. Some things work, some things don't. So, like
Yeah.
for example, some people will have food in the house, and it can be there, like the chocolate, the chips, the cookies, or whatever, and out of sight, out of mind. And other people, like just knowing that there's chocolate in the fridge is like burning a hole in their head, kind of thing. And so, just because having 5 chocolate bars in the fridge works for this person doesn't mean it's going to work for this person, because for this person they might just eat 5 chocolate bars, and that just makes everything sort of worse. And so,
Mhm.
it is there is often a lot of trial and error, but I think the becoming aware of those thoughts, and whether they're positive or negative, and the associations with them. Like one of the tools I often use is steer. You may have come across that one, where it's like you've got the situation, you've got the thought, you've got the emotion, action, and result, and we have a kind of default pattern. I was talking about an athlete this week with an athlete ahead of nationals
Mhm.
who was finding themselves getting really stressed and anxious and nervous, and I was like, well, what happens in that, like when you think like, oh, they're going to beat me. And while they're sort of talking, reflecting, they're like, well, in the past, like whenever I've gone in and been like, I'm going to beat you, and I always have, and I've won. And you can sort of flip the script by changing, whether it's the emotion or it's changing the thought, intentionally changing and focusing on it. It's like, if I go into this race being like, I'm going to win, then I will. And, or like, I'm going to give the best of my ability to put me in the position to win. Whereas if I focus on like, oh, they've won this race before, like, oh, they're better than me, and you get stuck in that sort of spiral. And yeah, I find it so fascinating. Like the longer I've worked as a dietitian, like I knew when I first did my degree, when did I start? 2005, I think, is when I started my dietetics degree. And one of the first courses we had to do was psychology. And I'm like, psychology? Like, what do we have to do? Like, what relevance has this got to anything? And the longer that I've worked as a dietitian, the more I realize, like, oh, wow, okay, this is something I've invested so much more time and training into utilizing it, because, yeah, the more we understand ourselves, the more likely we are. Doesn't mean we're going to do everything perfectly, but the more likely we can make the changes that help us to get to where we want to get to. And I guess going back to the hunger, whether it's post ride or the days after,
Mhm.
I mean, there can be a few things in there that can be. That could be the result of something. So often I find it's still the result of perhaps a bit of underfueling still. Like
Yeah.
perhaps they could have fueled better in that ride. That's one element. It can also be the recovery nutrition, because like we talked about when we were having gelato that time, is the timing makes a big difference. And I was talking about this study that had these men that two groups of men who ate, they all had the exact number of calories, and the only difference was one group had how whatever the recovery nutrition was immediately when they finished exercise, and the
Yeah.
other group had it 3 hours later. So overall, the daily totals were the same. They checked their glycogen muscle levels the next day, got them to do all these efforts, and the group that had the instant recovery nutrition outperformed the others so much in terms of the power and the repeatability of those efforts. So even
Yeah.
though it looked the same on paper, it wasn't. And I see that in practice as well, that whether you're an amateur or you're an elite, like the timing of what you eat when matters. And so you could eat that brownie like hours after you've ridden, and on paper, or the app says like it's the same. Like we eat that while you're riding, or you eat that immediately after you're riding. It's used by the body very, very differently. And so getting people to start refueling sooner, even if they don't need it, it changes, like further kickstarts a recovery process. So you're less likely to have that lingering hunger 6 hours later. And so that's part of why I like getting people to make notes in their food diaries about like their thoughts, their behaviors, their beliefs, and starting with what they're currently doing. So then they can reflect. I'm like, I was always hungry when I did that ride at this time and I didn't eat until this time. Whereas I listened to Gemma, tried this, fueled sooner. I'm like, oh, I feel like a different human. Like, oh, that feels good. And then sometimes you forget and you go back to the old habits and you're like, oh, it's not just in my head. It is. And I'm like, I used to do this all the time. I used to think this was normal. Like, what?
No, no, that's great. Great to hear you reiterate these important, essentially principles that you can. Once you feel it, then it's like ingrained in your psyche and more likely for you to repeat it versus,
Yeah.
and then it's also like, I want to go back to kind of curiosity, which is something you were kind of alluding to, is like when you have
Yeah.
clients who are curious and they're willing to try new things, whereas sometimes
Mm,
we get stuck in our routines and that prevents us from being
yeah.
curious. We find excuses not to be curious.
Yeah, like there was times during that I'm like, I was like, I just want to shake someone, like, just do it. Like you'll feel so much better. But like they've got to want to do it and try it and then feel the difference. And so, yeah, like sometimes it's the case of like trying to dig and figure out what motivates them. Like I've done a lot of additional training in motivational interviewing,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and I find like when I was doing my interviews, like I think it's a gift or a skill that I have where people can tell me something, but I can see something I can't visually see, but like I can see the reason behind
Yeah.
why and how and between the lines of, and it's helping them to see that for themselves and then build confidence to overcome. Because I think often there's fear. I think that was one of the biggest findings I had from my doctorate research as to why do athletes at all levels not feel in competition when competition is like the ultimate performance. And we're seeing a big change now in 2025 compared to the 2019 when I was doing my research. But one of the biggest factors were like, it doesn't work, I don't need it, or I'm going to get
Mhm.
fat. Ultimately, so, or I'm going to gain weight. If I fuel more, I'm going to gain weight. I don't want to gain weight, so it's a choice made out of fear of I don't
Mhm.
want to gain weight. I don't need it, so I can get away with it. And so they're fears that I'm often having to reassure people about. And often while when I'm making changes, like I know they could be feeling at this level, but I'm going to start at this level with a tiny little change above what they're currently doing that will help reassure them that, because yeah, like I've had people get worried that if they eat an energy bar, if they eat a walnut, that they're going to gain a kilogram of weight overnight. And I want to help them reassure themselves that that's not the case, and and help them to get confident and feel better in themselves, feel better in their recovery. And then we slowly build up, build up, build up. And it's not always linear as well. Like there's plenty of athletes that I work with who they've made changes and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they've regressed. And it's often the environment that they're in or the people they're around or their team. And so being there as support to help them get back to, and they'll be like, I know I feel better when I feel 80 grams an hour, but I don't know why I'm stuck. And it's going back to, all right, let's go back to 50, that's 55, 60, and build them back up to getting to that position where they feel their best and they're performing their best again.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it goes back to like what's going to resonate with them the most. And it sometimes does better when you're kind of doing the trickle
Yeah.
effect, kind of trickle in oh, this is starting to work, starting to get better. And I think that the whole struggle with calories is something that we all have, especially as we get older. have to deal
Mm.
with as their bodies change and metabolisms change. So it's really gratifying to hear that your approach, because it's very much meeting the person where they're at and not just force
Yeah.
feeding them, this fits, this is going to work for you, just do it, because you realize it's not sustainable, and that's hugely,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and the weight issue, the weight topic is so sensitive, and more so for some people than others. Then I've worked with both men and women who have disordered eating or eating disorders or patterns that are fearful or avoidant around food. And then for me, part of that is it's like I'm always not just thinking just about the performance. For me, it's like
yeah,
health, it's enjoyment, getting them to eat with their friends. So like sometimes I'm giving homework for people, and it might be going out for ice cream, and people are like, wait, what? Why did you tell them to go? Yeah, like that is literal homework I've given someone, a client before, is I wanted them to go and get a gelato. And or the stepping stone might have been having like a spoonful of their partner's gelato because getting a whole gelato was like too scary. And that might be once a week, once a month, but it was trying to help integrate them into some of the social environments that they were avoiding because of fear of this food. And so it's like helping them to learn, like, okay, this isn't going to break the bank. This isn't going to destroy everything. This is actually good for you. You feel more included, part of the community when you go. And there'll be times that you go, then you're like, I actually don't want ice cream. Oh, I don't want the gelato. And there'll be days that like really want the gelato.
yeah,
And it's knowing that it's neither right nor wrong, and like being intentional with how and when and where you include it, and enjoying food. So like, yeah, if you're in Italy, if you're in France, like enjoy the croissants, enjoy the gelato. But it's again, it's not about like only eat it. Still be smart, make intentional choices, be mindful, and have these different tools and tricks and techniques that help you make smart choices. Like I was saying before about the vegetables, and we learnt a new style of Italian eating called family style on this sort of trip, because in the past I always got the vegetables right at the end. I'm like, that's really annoying. I don't want the veggies at the end. I want them at the start. And then it's like, oh, if you get the Italian style, everything comes out at once and you can have all the vegetables at the beginning. And so then rather than getting full on bread and getting full on the pasta, it's like, well, you have
yes.
the vegetables and then you have the pasta, then you have the meat. And then in my case, most of the time I'm like, I don't actually even want dessert because I'm full.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And actually, going back to the whole motivational piece, and how to get people to do this to start with. One thing I forgot to mention is I always like to ask clients the question, if they're having trouble, to ask themselves, what's the worst that could happen?
Hmm. Yeah.
What's what could happen?
Yeah.
Are
I
you
do
going
that.
to fail? Are you
I
going to
do that a
die?
lot.
Yeah, it's like, just, and then I also love that you touched upon motivational interviewing, which I kind of learned a little bit about too. And I think that's a really effective means of persuasion in a way, because you're helping individuals, guiding them to the decision on their own, right? So it's like
Hmm.
they figured it out themselves, but you just kind of nudge them along with the right kind of questioning.
That's it, like, because I know most people can eat so much more than they're eating, but it's just like they're restricting unnecessarily or they're avoiding things unnecessarily, and it's actually creating a lot of the problems where and the same, like, with going back to the fueling training, like, that's the number one message I'm trying to push to people is, like, fuel your training more, like, you're probably not getting away with it as much as you think you are. You fuel your training more, you get better quality training, you recover faster, and most people tend to get leaner without trying because their food choices the rest of the day just by default change because you're not in that sort of ravenous catch up cookie monster. I want to eat everything in sight.
Yeah,
And eat until you sort of willpower is kicked back in again, and you're like, "Why did I eat that? And why did I eat that whole bag of chips?" It's
yeah,
and whatever it is, and what's the worst that can happen? I say that a lot to clients. I did a podcast couple of months ago with a woman that I worked with a number of years ago, Jemima, and that was one of the things that really helped her when she was in that avoidant of like, oh, I'm getting away with it, I don't need it. And I'll be like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Like, give it a go,
yeah,
try it. It either works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. Go back to what you were doing before or figure something else out. Like it
yeah,
don't take my word for it. It's like
yeah.
test it out, apply it for yourself, and you find your ideal approach based upon your personality, your lifestyle, your preferences, your training, whatever your goals are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I wanted to bring in anecdotal life experiences that I like just starting to figure out, oh, this is probably the reason it's happening is I always consider myself mediocre in training, but I could race at like another level. And I started
Mm,
realizing a few years ago that, oh, it's probably because I was so worried about bonking in the races thought I was over fueling, and I probably was fueling appropriate
Normally.
amount because I only had a lot more endurance than I thought. And actually, that was one thing I
Yeah.
wanted to touch upon for this on this trip is
Yeah.
seemed like eating properly. At least I know I did because you had these fabulous lunches, lunch stops that had super healthy, really tasty stuff that did not want to miss. In fact, it was like, oh, here's a little add-on, but I can't miss lunch because that's just
Yeah.
like the highlight. Is that I felt, strong throughout,
Yeah.
and I was probably quite fit going into it, but I didn't never did any rides. I think I mentioned over 3.5, 4 hours. And some of the rides we're out there for like 7.5. And it was, more than I'd ever done because of the fueling. I think I just had more energy. And going back to my
Yeah.
racing days, same thing is I probably underfueled in training. Thus,
Yeah.
I felt like, I had this mental thing where I was like, oh, I just do better in racing, which might have helped. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I probably could have trained better and then bumped my whole level
Yeah.
higher.
Oh,
Yeah.
for
If I
sure.
train or ate properly in training. So,
Oh, absolutely. Like I see so many athletes, both amateur and pros, that are actually they're just stagnant. They're training, they're just not progressing, or they're sometimes being left behind compared to other athletes at their level because they aren't feeling the training. And like one of my amateur riders that I've been working with the last couple of months, like within the first month of working with him, his 5 minute power, he's more like a mountain biker, and his 5 minute power in within like 2 or 3 weeks increased by I think 65 watts, and then it went up by I think about 95 watts in total. He's five, and this is from having been stagnant at I can't remember what it was. I think it was just can't remember what the number was, but it'd been stagnant at that level for months and months and months with his
yeah,
coach. And then his 5 minute, his 1 minute, and like 10 minute power all of a sudden just like started like skyrocketing. And his training quality, he was having to being prescribed harder training sessions all of a sudden, where it just been because historically he'd always been avoiding carbs, never fueled training because you don't need it. And so that's where it becomes this trial and error approach, because then also figuring out and experimenting with like, okay, well, if I'm not training, if I still have these higher carb days and I'm not training, I don't feel so good in terms of just everyday life. So on those days, I'm not going to have as much. I'm going to keep to my lower carb days because I feel better on those days. I'm like, okay, well, this is how we test it. Because if you feel better having a lower carb on that day, but if you know the next day you've got this really hard training session, like, okay, we bring the carbs back in a bit more into your dinner, bring it more back into your training session. And then that's where the training load goes up and up and up. And like here in Mallorca, the guys that I typically train with, they're pretty fast rides, pretty spicy. So I'm often riding at my FDP or above a lot of so I'll often feel these more than I need. And I went on the first ride yesterday in 6 weeks and managed to like only got dropped on the final climb because I haven't done
nice.
any climbing for ages. But
Yeah,
the only reason I could do that was because I was fueling. If I hadn't have fueled it, there's not a chance that I would have been able to keep going 35, 40 Ks an hour for 2.5 hours. Like just, it's
yeah,
impossible.
yeah, yeah. And that's gratifying to hear. I also wonder how much of yeah, I'm just interested, like how you can help people trust their appetite or trust what they're feeling in the moment. Because sometimes
Mm,
you just trust, oh, I feel really hungry. I mean, of course, after a
yeah.
big ride and you're depleted, your mind's going to say, eat everything in sight. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's,
yeah.
you want to slow it down or do the 20-minute rule where, what you eat first,
Yeah.
eat something, but then it takes 20 minutes for your stomach to process it and send it back to your
Yeah.
brain. But that seems to be also critical is how you allow yourself to trust what you feel as appetite
Yeah, like especially I think with appetite and cravings, because there's
craving.
appetite and hunger, and then there's
That's a
like
good
there's
point.
appetite and cravings, and they're kind of two different things. Because like specifically, sometimes like immediately after exercising, some people are really hungry, and other people have no appetite. And this is where it's more than just intuition, because like some people like, oh, intuitive eating, just like go and you feel. I'm like, well, that works for some people, but not for everyone. Because my athletes that are training 20, 25, 30 hours a week, often they're not hungry. And so in that scenario, they might be like, I'm not hungry, but I know I need to eat now, because if I don't, I'm going to suffer in 4 hours and I'm going to be ravenous. And so that's where it's the pausing in the mind, sort of mental thinking. So there's a couple of different tools that I talk about. One of them is like halt, like stop. And it's when okay, so like at my desk here, right, I have a can of Coke,
Yeah.
and I've got next to my desk, there's like there's lollies, there's biscuits, there's all sorts of fried food. So there's probably 10,000 calories right next to me within arm's reach right now. And not that I would ever, yeah, it's not really something that I crave because this is training food for me, a
Yeah.
can of
Yeah.
Coke. And, or maybe it's a banana bread or it's a brownie or something. Say a lot of times we see food and then we just eat it by habit. We eat it intuitively. We're at work. There's a box of chocolates on the table and we grab one as we go past. And so one tool that can be helpful is like, halt. Am I eating this because I'm hungry, because I'm angry, I'm lonely, I'm tired? Like, it's like, hang on, stop. Is there an emotional scenario here that's resulting in me eating or drinking this food? And if so, it can be uncovering different tools or different strategies to work with that. And so sometimes it might be people, I've used things like music, or I've used things like going for a walk or reading a book or like something with their hands. Or like it might be like they've got a ring or a fidget spinner to
Uh-huh.
keep themselves occupied. I think there's so many different techniques that we can use. It depends on the person. That's one of them. And another one that I'll often use with people if it's a craving is to um, pause and sort of wait. So say it is the chocolate brownie or
Mhm.
the donut, whatever it is. Be like, oh, I really want a donut. A lot of times when we have these cravings and we tend to just automatically, what's the word? Like rather than delaying, it's like the instant gratification. Like we see it, we eat it, we take it. And then afterwards you're like, what did I do that for? And we beat ourselves up and it sends that down that shame spiral. Whereas sometimes those cravings, they can be legitimate. They don't necessarily have to have a reason. It might not be that you're hungry. It could be that it could be emotional. It could be a whole host of things.
Yeah.
And sometimes with just time, they just disappear because it could be this fleeting thought that in one ear, out the
I
other.
get
Like
it.
we saw someone eating brownie or a donut. Oh, I want a donut. And then 30 minutes later, we've totally forgotten about it. So often I'll teach people as a strategy or as a tool that you can be like, okay, well, if in 30 minutes' time you're still thinking about that donut, you're still thinking about that brownie, whatever it is, allow yourself to eat it, but eat it intentionally, eat it mindfully and enjoy it and savor it. And if you get to a point where you're like, do you know what? I'm done. I'm good. It's like, okay, well, stop. You don't have to eat it. You don't have to finish it. And same thing goes like the gelato, or like you might buy a gelato and you're eating it and you're like, it's not very
Yeah.
good. But we keep eating it because we bought it and we have this thought like, well, I've paid for it. I have to eat it. Where it might be wasted calories, but that could be 200 or 300 calories that we're not really enjoying it. We're just eating it because
It's
we
there.
bought it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's there. And so, or because we paid for it, so we have to eat it. And those little tiny thoughts that happen usually in lots of different areas throughout the day are often the things that hold us back from progress. So with weight loss, for example, typically it's not just one thing that's happening. It might be 50 calories here, 100 here, 100 here, 100 here, that across the course of the day, the week, the month, the year is what results in the 1 kilogram a year over a 10-year period that results in like, how did I gain 10 kilos? Where did it come from? Like we
Yeah.
don't notice it when it's these tiny little amounts. But if we make these little changes and we start to be more intentional with them, rather than just like automatically as like, oh, I'm going to have a can of Coke because someone else is drinking a can of Coke.
Yeah.
Those changes can over time happen because of just that pause.
Yeah. No, and I think one theme that I keep hearing over and over again with your as you're talking is intentionality, which is also very much the one of the themes I use in the mental performance technique is if the more intentional you are with your training, your how you're looking at training, your session, your intervals, you'll get more out
Mm.
of it.
Yeah.
And then going back to the whole mindful acceptance commitment thing, what you're also advocating for is like, okay, maybe you take a couple deep breaths before you take the donut
Yeah.
so you can allow yourself to get past the emotional, I see donut, I want to eat it type of thing,
Yeah.
or I'm
Yeah.
starving because I just, realize I'm starving, but can you process that emotion and then get
Yeah.
through that? And it's almost, I'm almost wondering like how much is fight or flight? Are we using kind of parasympathetic or the sympathetic nervous system that's causing some of these cravings too? Because,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know when I'm going to get my next meal or blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
I think I talk a lot about being proactive rather than reactive. And it's not about being perfect with food, but a lot
Yeah.
of these like problems that we have are the aftermath of choices that happen hours, sometimes days earlier. And so it
Mm.
might be the rest day, like I'm ravenous on my rest day. And it's like, well, you've just had 3 or 4, 5 days of back to back burning 7,000 calories, eating 4,000. It's like, well, that deficit is going to hit you hard at some point, and it hits you usually when you stop. And so, and then if your body's trying to recover, often sometimes those days you might need a little bit more, but then
Yeah.
people are restricting further, or they're not eating more vegetables, or they're eating carbohydrates that are processing really quickly. They don't keep them feeling full for later. So it's not this one size approach. There's so many different little things that we can like tweak and adjust depending on what their starting point is. But I find that it really does come back to this mindfulness and being aware and noticing for yourself, like, out of that curiosity. I love people being curious. And being curious, whether it's being about aware or being curious about what's working, what isn't working, and testing and tweaking and adjusting, and that over time leads to it becoming easier to find the best approach for you and your training.
Yeah, I think it's really funny. What you're referring to is also a very tried and true approach to product development, where you're just like iterate, iterate, iterate quickly, and then you come to a better product. Maybe now in this
Yeah,
case, it's a better um, nutritional habit because you're. And I also
yeah.
was just reflecting on how you had such a great mood throughout our trip, in spite of not being able to do much exercise. I know you were like
Yeah,
running around. You were doing like lots of just maybe not non-aerobic exercise, but you were burning calories just like because you were so
yeah,
your ability to just like still be cheerful. Because I know so much of us rely on exercise as like our therapy,
yeah,
that we get cranky, crotchety, so forth if we're not able to do our exercise or daily dose, so to speak. But you're able
yeah,
to somehow be intentional with what you're doing, but also get past this. Oh, I this for these 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I can be okay just doing some minimal walking and, stuff. And that's maybe
oh
part of,
yeah,
yeah, makes you successful in what you do, but also like, it's also inspirational because you're basically modeling kind of behaviors you'd maybe like to see your
yeah.
clients be able to do.
Well,
And
that's
is
it.
that,
Like, and I'm always like trying to like practice what I preach, and I don't hide. Like, I've eaten gelato. I'm not going to be like, oh, like no, I haven't. No, I'm just going to eat it secretly in the corner. Like that. That sends the wrong message. But there'll be times when the there's like everyone else is having dessert. I think there was one that was funny because then peer pressure can be such a fascinating thing. There was one dinner on I can't remember which trip it was, where
well,
I didn't want dessert, and then everyone else ordered dessert. I think it was the last night on your trip. It was actually. It was the last night at this French restaurant in Menton, and I didn't want dessert, and I was full. And
yeah, I
then
remember that
the
actually.
do you remember? Yeah. And
Mhm.
then the waiter came back to me. He's like, "You're the only person that hasn't ordered dessert." I'm like, "It's like you need to order dessert." I'm like, "Really?" And I was like, okay, fine, I'll get it was like a profiterole. And it came and it was enormous. And like, it was like 3 scoops of ice cream and it was like a profiterole the size of my head. And I think I got through like 3 mouthfuls of it and I'm like, I'm done. But that has come from like years and years of habits and practice where I think perhaps in the past, the younger version of me would have eaten it. And I was peer pressured into ordering it, but I probably would have been satisfied without it or
Yeah.
just having a spoonful of somebody else's. And this is where things that come with time and practice, and we don't it's learning to not beat yourself up about it or or whatever. But yeah, I think whether it's willpower or mindset or like just understanding, like, I won't feel good if I keep eating this and force this down, even though it's delicious. Like, I'm physically full and I won't feel comfortable, I won't feel good if I just keep forcing it down just because I was kind of peer pressured into ordering it.
Yeah. And is that going through your head in the moment, or you're kind of like just, I know that not all of that is going through your head, but it's kind of like, it's
Yeah.
tough for a lot of us where it's like, I'm used to, for example, having dessert after dinner. So if I don't have something
Yeah.
sweet, it doesn't feel complete. And then the
Yeah.
problem, one bite of chocolate that leads to another, and then it's like hard for me to.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. It depends. It's something that can change with time because I find when people start feeling training better, they're getting the balance of what they need more around the training because that's when you need more. Like,
Mhm.
so many people come to me and they're like, I'm addicted to sugar, I'm addicted to coffee. And I'm like, it's probably not the problem. Like, that's probably the aftermath of the issue of not enough food, XYZ. We correct that. And they come back a couple and they're like, that is so weird. I haven't had lollies or sweets in a week. Like, my wife is be like, "You hypnotized me. Like, what? Like, I've got ice cream in the freezer that's been there for 2 weeks. Like, what is going on? Like, I haven't eaten any ice cream because, and it's there, and I could eat it, but I'm like, I don't even want it. Like, what have you done?"
Yeah.
And but because you're getting what you need when you need it. The problem that we put the problem is the ice cream. It's like, no, the ice cream is neither good nor bad. And I like to work with people of like some people, whether it's like wine, for example, or alcohol, and they're like, "Oh, I really enjoyed my glass of wine, oh, but I really should stop drinking because it's bad for me," and XYZ. And so it's neither good nor bad. It's like, let's test it out. Like, let's not have it for a week. Let's have it for a week. We can make it fit. We can make it work in a way that, and sometimes they decide, like, actually, it's part of my wind down routine with my partner, and I sit on the couch and we can watch some TV and I can just de stress and I really enjoy it. And if I don't have it, I don't feel that connection with my partner anymore. It's like, okay, well, let's include it and be intentional about it.
Yeah.
And whereas other times, there's other athletes. I was talking to a client that I worked with. I want to get him on the podcast. I worked with him a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
and working in the construction field where like everyone drinks quite heavily, and he was trying to lose weight, and one of the things we started experimenting with was these alcohol free beers, and he copped a lot of slack from the guys initially because he was bringing to like barbecues these alcohol free beers, like, whoa, what's that sort of nonsense. And then all of a sudden, like, he was the first one, and all of a sudden all the guys around him start drinking it as well. And I was talking about it him the other, he's like, yeah, I don't drink at all anymore, like I haven't drunk in months. And that behavior from going from like always drinking to never drinking, I never told him to stop drinking, but it was that process of like, oh, I feel so much better the days that I don't drink, and I can do so much more. I can be present with my job, my work, my family, whatever it is. If I want to drink, sure, I can, but actually I prefer not to in this particular moment in my life.
Yeah.
It's that self discovery.
Yeah. It's self-discovery. What's the worst that could happen? And then the your
Yeah,
ripple effect that you were hoping did happen,
yeah, yeah.
affecting other people's lives and habits.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's-
It's and that's the thing with me for cycling, like my mission, my goal is to change the culture of nutrition around cycling from being like from that eating is cheating to fueling for performance.
cool.
And we don't have to be going like super high carbs or super low. It's being smart with them. Sometimes we need more, sometimes we need less. And it always comes back to like, what's the purpose of the ride, the training that you're doing? And is it for enjoyment? Is it for performance? And there's a time when we need more. And by eating more, we can feel better. We can
Yeah.
do these big adventures and enjoy it and not feel broken at the end of it and really truly experience it.
Yeah. So it's actually, so some would say that what most of us did, a couple weeks ago on the trip with you was that a vacation, or do you need a vacation from the vacation after that? So
Yeah.
if you feel better, then it'll feel more like a vacation because you won't need as much
Yeah.
recovery time
Yeah. Yeah,
afterwards.
you get back from the end of the ride and you can go and explore the town and go for a wander versus like you get back from the ride and you're like, I'm just on the couch and I'm done. That's it. I'm done for the day.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking it's interesting because there's perception that to be a good cyclist, going back to the whole cycling, is it's all strength to weight, and that you have to be, have to weigh your food, and you have to, eat like maybe you do at the very, very highest level, but as is it Pauline Prevot said after she won the Tour de France that this was like she recognized she was in an unhealthy state, a body
Well, it's
state,
not, yeah. Well, it's not sustainable. It's not,
and that's
it's,
painful.
yeah, and oh, that I mean, that whole I think I'm going to do a whole separate podcast on that because I've been asked about that many, many
Good.
times. Because yeah, and it's a fine line because there's a point that it is helpful, there's a point that it's not. And I've seen a lot of athletes that have been told point blank, you need to lose weight, and I'm like, this person has no weight to lose. Like, what we're gonna cut off an arm, a leg, or like a foot? Like that's the only way. Like they've got nothing to lose. Weight means they're gonna lose performance because the only weight is muscle or
Yeah.
bone. And I've seen athletes lose bone mass very, very quickly. So I think with her, it's like, as she clearly says, like, yes, I've lost weight, but it's been over many months with a lot of support, and it's been this really small sort of change. And
Yeah.
that ultimately with testing. So when I've had athletes come to me like, I want to lose weight, and I can't guarantee or promise that they will or won't, because I've seen athletes improve dramatically at the same weight. I've seen athletes improve at a heavier weight. I've seen athletes improve at a lower weight. And there's Olympic athletes that I've worked at who their role with me was they had to gain weight to be on the team. And if they didn't, they weren't on the team because their current weight was too low for performance. And so it's neither, it's this very much up to the looking at the individual, the type of riding they're doing. Are they a time trialist? Are they a track cyclist? Are they what is their natural physiology? And some people are naturally more petite and
Yeah.
leaner and lighter. Some people are naturally more muscular and bigger and more powerful. It's looking at for me, it's with finding a weight that is sustainable for somebody year round that without even trying, like I was saying before, myself stepped on the scales yesterday, 62 and a half. That's very, very stable for me. Like
Hmm.
62, and it'll go, maybe I could be lower if I really focused on it, but I'm like, is it worth the change? Is it worth the sacrifice? And I'm not trying to race right now. I'm not trying to perform, but in the future, if I was, maybe I could get down to 60, 59. But it also comes at a cost, and it
Yeah.
may not be good for my health mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever. So
Yeah.
there's with that whole weight loss, weight change, there's yeah, having the right team and support around you, and doing it in a way that optimizes performance, because you could lose weight, but you've lost muscle. And I've seen that happen a lot of times, because if you aren't fueling properly, you're more likely to lose muscle. If you're not recovering properly
Yeah.
with your nutrition, you're more likely to break up and lose muscle to give your body has the energy, the carbohydrates to keep your brain functioning and your heart functioning, and all these factors going on.
Yeah, yeah, like, so my partner and I, well, she's very was a high level cyclist, just would always notice when women cyclists go basically, they're not at their set point, they're way below it, and she could almost predict, like, how long that performance would last. You know,
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
later, it's not sustainable. I mean, maybe you can do it for the short amount of time, but if you try to just perpetuate this under eating, under fueling, you're probably it's not gonna be
Yeah,
good.
and it's a really, really tricky fine line, and that's where I think it's my role of what I do with a lot of the athletes, male and female, that I work with, is they've got a lot of noise, and a lot of time it's like, you don't look like you aesthetically, you should be less, you should be small, but it's helping them build the confidence for them to be like, the body composition, the weight, the number I am, where I am right now, this is the most powerful, the strongest athlete that I am, because the leaner, the more restrictive, the more prone to getting sick, and that might be
Yeah.
short-term sickness, it might be long-term sickness, and I've seen athletes, their careers being destroyed because of this chronic underfueling and chronic undereating, or trying to push and force a weight that is not sustainable for their health or performance. And so, yeah, it's a very, very, very tricky area and topic to discuss, and it's not this one size fits all about like everyone should be this weight, everyone should be this number, because I've worked with riders from everywhere from 40 to 90 kilograms in the pro peloton,
Yeah.
and they all could be performing in their role at the peak at that number, but it's like, how do they get there and how do they support the training quality in order to do that in the best way for them?
Yeah, no, that's what's so neat about everyone's different. It's a puzzle that you're and there's not just the nutritional puzzle, but like you're saying, the behavioral puzzle. So I'm very
Mhm.
glad that you asked to have me chat a little bit, but I'm not sure if I answered any questions you might have because we had just had a really nice, very nice, I think, productive talk of where I got to
Yeah.
learn more about you.
Well, Well, yeah, but also I think what I found, why I wanted to have the chatting, invite you on, because I think so many people can be like, "Oh, I don't need it. I don't need it. Like, I'm not racing." And for me, like one of the comments that sort of stood out was the conversation we had probably early on, where I'm sort of like, eat more, eat more," just sort of like trying to nudge people to eat more on this sort of trip. Like, you need more. Like, I want you to have like the drink mix plus a bar every half an hour, plus this, plus this, plus this, and then sort of test and experiment around the way, like, and just give it a go, because I want you all to do all the distances and all the rides and feel amazing. And then, yeah, the comment about initially like, I don't think I need this much, or this is more than I ate when I'm racing. And then you're like, oh, wow, I feel so good. Like, I feel so strong. Like, this is great. And that it's a conversation or an experience I see happening a lot, and I like being able to share that experience, whether it's an acute or a chronic experience, with
Yeah.
other people as well.
No, yeah, I think a lot of it for me was feeling the difference is what makes the change possible. It's like, oh, this is just really I feel so much better. Like I should do
Yeah.
this more often, except, it's sometimes what do you want to call it? Your memories can be selective when you're depending on, if you insert yourself straight back into an environment where you're back into the old routines and so forth, you have to nudge yourself to stay on course. I do know that in spite of all I ate. Yes, I had wonderful lunches on this trip. I probably underfueled up until that point because I wanted to have a lot for that lunch. I'd have maybe a bar before the lunch stop, which probably
Yeah,
wasn't enough. It was definitely not 2 bars every hour because that was only
yeah,
still like, what, 60 grams of carbos or something?
yeah,
So anyways, but yeah, it's like doing these baby steps, but then figuring a way to sustain the behavioral change would be kind of is what I always love to figure out. It's like, how do we
mm,
just, because it's not like flipping a switch. It has to
no,
be, it's usually incremental. And that's, I like fascinated with how you do that with your athletes in terms of, okay, let's just nudge up the caloric intake a little bit. Or yes, you can have, instead of no desserts, have a spoonful of gelato, so you just kind of nudge everything up
yeah.
and people
Yeah, I mean,
become,
in practice, most people that I work with, I find that it takes about 3 months, and
yeah,
for the average person, it's like 6 sessions over 3 months, I find is enough to, like, really kickstart the changes from a behavioral perspective,
exactly.
and because I find, like, a one-off session, it just wastes people time and money because, like, sure, I can answer questions, but I've found from experience that people are like, "Oh, this, and this, and this, and this," and they have a million and one questions, and then they leave and they don't change anything. And I'm like,
Yep.
I'm not interested in wasting people's time or money. So maybe it costs a bit more, but I've had people like,
Yeah,
"Oh, you cost more than my coach costs this year." And I'm like, "Yeah, but how many years have you been working with my coach?" Like, my goal is to kind of work my way out of a job in the sense that then you know your
100%.
body, you understand how you work and what works so that you can and then you've at least got the structure, the bare basics, and then it's continuing and practicing and going
Yep.
on. I do find that generally by around week 8, week 10, it's people like, "Oh, okay, this is starting to really kick in," and then it's more about, like, reinforcement of, like, how to keep doing this and how to change it on the long term, and so it is a long-term sort of process, and
Yeah.
that's why I'll say no to people because, like, I'm not interested in wasting people's time or money.
Yep.
And people sometimes just aren't ready, and I find often the average person that I worked with has been listening to me, following me for about 3 years or so before they're ready to
That
make a change, or they've hit enough of those rock bottoms of pain points or disasters or races gone wrong that they're like, okay, maybe I can't do this on my own. And so then it's like, okay, well, because I'll see the food diaries, I'll see what they're training. Like for me, it's glaringly obvious what's going wrong. And then my goal is to help them to see and then to test and to get confident and to then start building and building and building because like often most of the time the numbers people fixate on numbers, but like often the numbers are right, but the timing is all wrong. And so you get the timing more optimal and then all the problems generally start to disappear and it
yeah.
becomes easier to focus on. But it's that whole like knowing what to focus on and how, when, and the support along the way.
Yeah, you're helping also people see the forest from the trees and or vice versa so that they're
Yeah.
have a clearer path. And we have the same philosophy. It's like I want to work myself out of a job so that they have the tools to continue forward and
Yeah.
flourish however they like. And it's not for everyone. They have to be
No.
in the right headspace to start with. They have to be motivated and they also have to just part of the motivation is wanting it, right? Because like
Yeah.
you said, something nudge them to want to see you or work with you. Whereas they're like, oh, it's not where I don't want to pay because it's just not, does it, it's a perceived value. Like they haven't perceived it
Yeah.
as being as valuable as, but you can't force them. They need to want to do it, then they'll appreciate it. Um,
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
that's why I was, like, tremendously grateful to have met you on the trip, and hopefully we can keep, in connection, and,
Yeah.
I think I love your podcast format, and it's also very just interesting to kind of see your evolution and also how you've touched all these different people's lives in positive ways, because as we know, we have to eat to live. It's not or we could live to eat, but, anyways, it's we have to, be better to enjoy what we're doing.
Like there's too much fear around food. Like food is never good nor bad. And it's like and food is great. Like and being able to enjoy beautiful meals when you're in a foreign country and on a holiday. Like it's
Yeah.
fantastic to be able to experience that and to share that with others. And so yeah, I do love seeing people like eliminate that fear and get the enjoyment and include those things and yeah, like the quality of life rather than just purely being focusing on performance because it's like we've got our everyday nutrition, we've got our train nutrition, we've got our race nutrition. They're all related, they're all have their different values and importances, they all connect, but it's like how that in connects is going to be unique for you and what that looks like will be unique for you.
Yeah, and to be able to sustain that, so because, right, if it's sustainable, then it's usually maybe more enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah.
and how do they
Yeah.
feed on each other without, like you were talking about at the very beginning of this having self guilt, self doubt, all that hinders our performance more than we know, coming from that mental performance standpoint.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Before we wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom from a psychology perspective that you'd love to
Well,
share?
let's just well, I think the most important thing that I try to instill in clients is don't. This might be total out of left field, but don't underestimate the positivity smiling technique of just smiling more, which leads to maybe appreciating more when we
Yeah.
get to do these wonderful physical activities. So basically, almost an instant reframe of looking at all the bright sides of we're out here outdoors, we're able to do what we want to do. Let's enjoy it and fully appreciate it, and I think that's
Mm,
almost guaranteed to bump up your performance no matter what.
absolutely. Yeah. And finding those things that give you that joy and give you that happiness. And it's not false. It's not fake. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, to leave with, probably heard of the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry and the basketball team. So they have,
Hmm.
like, there are 5 team values that are listed on their whiteboard, every practice, and one day the media asked them, like, what asked the coach Kerr, like, "What are these?" He goes, "Oh, they're the team values." Everyone's kinda bought into them. So you'll probably never guess. Can you even imagine, like, what one of those words were? One of the values were? They're 5 words.
Probably smiling or being happy or like joy or something,
Yeah,
mayhaps.
so you were the only person I've, talked to who've asked this question who got the number 1 is joy. So
Yeah.
it's bring joy to others and to yourself. It has to do both.
Yeah.
Number
Yeah.
2 was actually mindfulness.
Yeah.
So be mindful of others and yourself. And then number 3 was compassion,
Mm,
self-compassion, compassion to others. I think number 4 was competitiveness. And then I think number 5 was I actually can't remember what number 5 was, but those top 3 really resonated with me.
mm,
Because if you play with joy, you're gonna do well. And
yeah.
to me, those were just really neat, not what you would think would be a top level professional team's
Yeah, but then when
value.
you have joy, like it was interesting because last year, my goal for last year or vision for last year was to have a year of joy, and for me, like I want to have a life that the joy just it's contagious and it just like oozes out of me, kind of thing. That people are joyful around me because they're like, oh, she's joyful as well, and filling your life with things that create joy. So then in the mini moments that I had breaks on that sort of trip, I would be like, okay, I'm going for a walk in the mountains. And it may not be the cycling that I would normally do at home, but it's like being outside. I'm like, this is amazing. This is beautiful. This is cool. And being blessed to be able to be in this place is amazing.
And almost to me, it actually serves as almost this greater purpose because you're serving to have this be contagious to others to spread
Yeah.
that joy.
Yeah.
So that's right. That was the last thing I forgot to mention was once you know you have this greater purpose, it
Yeah.
makes everything else much easier to
Absolutely. Yeah,
execute.
I agree. Like knowing your why, knowing your mission, knowing what's important to you, and that helps to drive you, gives you your North Star. And even if you
Mhm.
don't exactly know how you're going to get there, it's like, this is important and somehow I'm going to make it happen. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This was hugely inspirational, and I felt very privileged to get to be on your podcast, Gemma.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, thank you as well for joining me and having this chat. It's been really fun, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. Stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, you're welcome. Well, that's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I will see you next time.